we're very happy to have joining us now Reiner Braun, who's the executive director of the International Peace Bureau and is based in Germany. Mr. Braun, thank you so much for being with us.
Good evening from my side.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you here. You know, I think that the American media is in a frenzy against Germany as a country, apparently saying that it's Germany's fault that, Russia feels emboldened in Ukraine and Germans are to blame. So from your perspective, why is it that it does seem that many Germans are very wary of this U.S.-NATO war drive in Ukraine?
You know, many people in Germany have not forgotten that the Soviet Union has 27 million victims in the Second World War. And they have never forgotten that Russia was attacked in the last 200 years 3 times from the West. So they believe, and this is also the result of the policy of common security by Willy Brandt and Egon Bahr, that we should have friendly relations with Russia. Not relations without any controversies, but relation of friendships and common security. And when you are looking back to the German history, Germany always had a good life and a peaceful living together when it had positive relations to Russia. This starts with Bismarck. This was a part of the Weimar Republic. This was very important in the time of the Willy Brandt and Egon Bahr. And never forget, the German unification would be impossible without the positive vote of the Soviet Union and of Gorbachev. So we have not many Germans, but our government has forgotten it, but many Germans have not forgotten it. So this is the reason that the majority of the German people want to have friendship with Russia. And maybe one more argument. In Germany are living about 8 to 10 million people which were living in former times in different parts of the Soviet Union. They are now a part of Germany, the so-called German Russians, which were going to the Soviet Union, to Russia, about many centuries. And they are a part of our society. They live with us. And we want to live with them, and we can live with them together. Why should we not live with the Russians together? There is no reason, no argument. The only argument is that the German government is following the horrible confrontation politics of NATO and above all of the US. That is absolutely not in the interest of Germany, economically not, politically not, ecologically not. We are living in the common house of Europe. So that is on one side the reason many Germans are believing positive relations to Russia are important. And on the other side, we are really, as peace movement, organizing actions and activity against these confrontational politics of NATO and the United States.
You know, I'm curious, you mentioned NATO. To what extent is there an anti-NATO movement in Germany? I remember during like the Trump era, there was some slight talk about this, but are there any, serious anti-NATO parties in Germany? And is there an anti-NATO sentiment at all on the ground?
When we are looking to the polls, about 1/3 of the German population is concerned about NATO. They are not absolutely against NATO, but they are concerned about the policy of NATO. So there is a background for activities and actions. The big majority of the peace movement and also a big part of the left party are more or less against NATO. So there is a background. Because, and we always hear day to day the story, Russia will attack NATO. This is a totally unbelievable story. Can you imagine that a country which is spending 1/14 of military budget for military purposes will attack the others? 1.1 trillion is the NATO budget. 65 billion is the Russian military budget. How stupid must be a country which is spending 1/14 of the military budget to attack the bigger, which is spending 14 times more for it. And maybe another argument to show the stupidness. The economic power of of Russia is 1/10 of the economic power of the European Union. And can you imagine that such a country will attack the others? You know, this is a horrible story of lie, like it was always a story of lie. And this is also the reason many people in Germany are more or less concerned. What does this mean, attacking? Should we not go for negotiations? And I'm very happy, and I was listening to Yuri, that he said negotiations, discussion, dialogue. That is what we need. We need to come back to this policy of common security. That is the way to solve the problem. And to say one word from my side to this agreement of Minsk II. The background of Minsk II is the so-called Steinmeier formula, the Steinmeier agreement from 2018. That said, first step, a federal constitution between the separatists and the rest of the Ukraine. Second, negotiations where everyone could participate. Third, an international agreement about these developments. Fourth, solving the border problems. But 1, 2, 3. And who is not fulfilling the obligation of 1, 2, 3? The Ukrainian government. And why do they not fulfill the Ukrainian government? Do they not do this? Because on one side they have fascists and right-wing people in their government. On the other side, because they know they have the power of the United States behind themselves. So when you are speaking about the development, you have first to say it is the policy of NATO and the United States who is responsible for the situation. I'm not totally sure if every reaction of the Russian government is really brilliant, but in any case, they are reacting from a defensive position, and NATO is acting from a very aggressive position. That is the totally truth, and we are trying to mobilize the people in our country as peace movement for this truth.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the point about, sort of new and broader security architectures. And obviously this is something that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov raised just the other day with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe meetings in 99 and 2010, that there's a possibility of doing this. I mean, is NATO an obsolete entity when we're even talking about how, security concerns should be discussed and governed in Europe?
For me, NATO's place is the garbage place, because it is out of history. With the end of the Warsaw Pact, it was time to dissolve NATO. But what was our politicians, the US, but also the Europeans doing? They find new jobs for these military tiger. The new jobs was to intervene all over the world. And it is a lie to say that NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO is the biggest worldwide military pact, having contracts and negotiations and big common work with Japan, with South Korea, with Malaysia, with Singapore. So NATO is the biggest military alliance in the world. And from my understanding, when you are mentioning common security, there is no place for such an organization. We have for common security the OSCE. And can you imagine, NATO is spending $1.1 trillion US. We have not enough money for social purposes. We have not enough money for solving the climate problem. We don't know how to solve the pandemic. And we need money for all of that. And instead of spending these monies for these social needs, we are spending the money for the stupid military purpose, for the aggressions, for destroying everything. And let me say some sentence to a war in Central Europe. In this region, Ukraine, Poland, Germany, there are 50 nuclear power plants. The biggest European nuclear power plant is in Ukraine. In a war, these nuclear power plants will be immediately destroyed. Can you imagine what this means? Wow. This is the same like putting down nuclear weapons. That's absolutely the same. So the whole Central Europe will be radioactive and totally destroyed. That is the consequences of modern conventional wars in the middle of Europe. So the situation in Europe is totally impossible to make wars without destroying the whole country, the people, the population, the landscape. We will have millions of refugees. So that is the reality. So people who are speaking about war, they are, on one side, they are either idiots, second, they know nothing, or third, they are really killers for the situation in Central and Middle Europe.
Do you, when we're watching this internationally play out, I'm sure there's hawkish voices in Germany, but we're seeing that it's pretty much the US and the UK, their leadership, that are pushing this escalation more than any other country. And we've seen in the US media, there's been a lot of anti-German articles ever since, Germany has been taking this very cautious or seemingly cautious approach. So I'm curious, what's the reaction been in a country like Germany that's always been quite a good ally of the US to watch the US media and US officials really kind of degrade Germany and insult Germany for not, just going along with the war drums?
All of us have so many friends in the United States, and we are working with our friends. We were visiting them, they were visiting us. So maybe let these right-wing media and these media tell whatever they want. We know that we have a lot of American support with our activities, and the US people, the progressive US people, can also rely on us. So I don't care about that. This is the same situation like 2003 by the Iraq War. Oh God, they were accusing us. And we were the winner. We were totally right. Everything that we were saying in 2003 happened in the reality. Everything that we were saying to Afghanistan happened. So, I'm optimistic and also convinced enough that we should keep it and continue doing this. But let me say one word to the German government to destroy illusions. We have this new German government since November. In this government, we have two parties which are horrible anti-Russian parties. These, I'd have to say it very clear. These are the Greens and the Liberals. They are hateful Russian parties. And they try to push the whole government more and more to the position of the US government. And they are quite successful. And so we definitely need a bigger opposition against this policy. And this new government and the leaders of the new government, quite all of them, are coming what I'm always mentioning, the Atlantic Bridge. This is the common organization of politicians from both sides working together to support and to strengthen NATO. All of them, above all our foreign minister. It is a pity to say that this lady is really war-oriented. And so please be very careful when you are discussing about the German government. We have parts in the government, above all by the Social Democrats, which are trying to reduce fights. And we are trying to fight more or less peaceful ways. But they are not against sanctions. So they are only partly peaceful. But they are nearer to us than these war-oriented parties like the Liberals and the Greens. So in Germany, to understand the situation, there is a really hard fight. Which side will get the support of the people? And there we have a very important player, and this is really a horrible, bad player. These are the mass media. I never in the last 20 years saw that the mass media are really the avant-garde in pushing to confrontation and war. Not only the right-wing mass media, like in Germany, the Bild Zeitung, we are used. But these, what we are calling in the past, left liberal newspapers, they are really pushing for war. When you are looking to the Spiegel or to the Süddeutsche Zeitung, they are horrible what their anti-Russian campaign is doing. So we are also in Germany in a quite difficult situation. We are isolated when we are looking to the elites. We are isolated when we are looking to the mass media. But, we are quite powerful when we are looking to the will of the people. And what we now start with different campaigns and actions and first demonstration is to mobilize these people for more peaceful actions and activities.
No, I think that's an extraordinarily important point, and I think what you're saying about America is true. I mean, I know in cities all around the United States, actually, people are planning to protest here this Saturday against the escalation there in Europe. And I wonder if, obviously this is a terrible situation in so many ways, but if you think that there's a possibility that this could be an inflection point, a turning point for a different kind of politics, on war and peace issues in Europe more broadly, that the sort of, coming so close to such a major crisis that perhaps that could cause, people to look at things very differently than perhaps they have been for the past few years?
I think we should analyze the situation a little bit broader. the confrontation situation in Ukraine is for me only one part of this huge fight which we have now for a new world order under capitalistic circumstances. And then I have first to mention China as the biggest, second, very important crisis with a very dangerous situation when I'm looking to several places, above all for Taiwan. So this fight between these new powers in the world, above all China, but also partly Russia and some of these countries like Brazil and India, and the old historical big powers like United States and also like the superpower European Union, is a fight which is not peaceful, because it's a fight for resources, and the countries and the powers which are becoming weaker are fighting for survival and to be strong. This is not historically new. We know this from the Romans, we know this from the Middle Age, we know this from the First World War and. But this fight is under new circumstances. The first circumstances of nuclear weapons, the circumstances of climate change, the circumstances of limited resources in the world. So it is really a very dangerous fight. And this fight needs an alternative today and also for long term. And this alternative for me is only let us come back to the policy of common security, to accept you and we have interest, but the other side has also interest. And the interests of the other side are in the same way legitimate like our interests are legitimate. And we have to find the common solutions to negotiate, discuss, evaluate the interest, and find peaceful solutions by dialogue, negotiations, and discussions. That is the only way I see for Europe, but I also see for other parts of the world. And we have this year the 40 years anniversary of this very famous Olaf Palme report from 1982, which was the background for the common security policy till to Gorbachev. And we are now working together with a quite interesting group of high famous people, politicians, scientists, and a new Olaf Palme report on common security. And I think we have to push this report, we have to work with that, we have to bring these ideas of common security again in the public discussion. This is the only way I think we can overcome these worldwide, very aggressive and very confrontational situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Reiner Braun of the International Peace Bureau, we really appreciate you joining us here on the Freedom Side.
It was a pleasure.